Probably won't do a very long stream today, but I got some time. I wanted to get on and do a little bit. Last time I streamed, we made platinum. This time, I think I'm going to try and do a more tutorial type draft. So I'm going to. Oh, I've got draft in progress. We'll just forfeit it. Goodbye. That was probably dumb, but 5,000 a pack. I get another pack. Absolutely nothing. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. I want to spend this whole time just opening packs. Back. Back. There we go. Enter with event tickets. Yes, 4 of my 93. Alright, so right now I believe that in draft, Utera is pretty strong. I haven't done a lot of drafting in the new set. However, in this opening pack, there is a legendary, and I am hard-pressed to turn down a legendary that I get to keep in my collection. So I'm going to take the legendary, which is Nexus Bubble. That's not the best option for this as a strategic draft. It's actually kind of bad. I have 3.8 million silver. Oh, I'm going to pass with the legendary. It hurts a little bit, but I want to do this as a training draft. So, if you're a newer player and drafting, take the legendary every time. However, let's assume this card wasn't here. You've got the Restless Wanderers, which can be a lot of fun if you can build the deck around it. It is a very specific goal that you have with that. You have to go Necreum as your second faction to get the Ruthless Wanderers. It is not worth trying to do for this. If you might work 1 out of every 10 drafts that you do, where you get enough Spirit Wanderers to make it worthwhile. This is not going to be what I pick, and it shouldn't be what anybody picks, really, unless you're just trying to have fun and build that Spirit Wanderer deck. The Unstable Seer. This is a new card with Raiders Unchained. I have not actually really played with it. It is intriguing. It's part of a Defender deck. Its stats are actually kind of lackluster for what it is. I would have expected this to have a much more rigid progression of like 6-6, 10-10, 16-16 with Defender on it. Yes, it's in the faction that negates Defender, but the Vengeance ability means that you have to buff it, and then you're just investing too much in this guy to try and pull off some kind of cool Vengeance shenanigans. So its stats being lackluster, and the Defender, yeah, I'm going to be passing on this. Zombie Dread Knight can be really good. I'm not familiar enough with this draft environment to know how much regeneration there is in it. That will come with time. Depending upon the draft environment, this could be either really good or really bad. If it's got a lot of zombies, if it's got Zrath and Zombie Titan and I can't remember the zombie that gives +1/+1 to the left and rightmost lanes and regen 1, but if it's got those cards in it, then this guy gets really good. If it doesn't have good ways to give regeneration, it's really bad. So it all comes down to what the current meta is, and I don't know. So I've ruled out the top 3 cards. I've ruled out Nexus Bubble just because I'm trying to do something tutorial here, and you're not going to get legendaries in each draft. I would take this normally if I were doing this as a normal draft. Brings me to the Lotus and Lightbringer Council. Lotus can be useful, but it's more of a I'm far behind on board. Let's try to get caught up. If your opponent has creatures in most or all lanes, Lotus can be really good. If he doesn't, it's kind of a dead draw. And it doesn't scale particularly well. You can definitely put this in some constructed style decks where you are trying to leverage some functionality around plants and getting multiple creatures at one time and better lane control. But I'm not a fan of this guy in draft. His stats are just too lackluster. Which brings me to the card I'm going to pick, the Lightbringer Council. Still not a great card. Its stats are slightly subpar, but it's got an interesting ability. Whenever you smack your opponent with a new terror creature, you gain health. Simple enough. So I want to take this and see where we go with it. Nexus Bubble's the right pick, just because it's legendary, but I'm going to take Lightbringer Council. Okay, so right away I see that Zombie Titan is in this set, as is Rotfiend. So this draft environment has some very strong Necreum cards. I'm going to take the Rotfiend here because this is one of the best underdrops that you see in draft. With 7 attack on the rank 1, if I don't play this in player level 1, I drop this guy as a blocker and can clean up most level 2s, take out some level 2s by itself. So it's not a card that must be leveled to be useful late game, which is very, very important when you are considering what you're going to do in draft. Also, its leveling progression is really nice. Ignore the fact that its minus gets worse and worse. If you use this guy solely as a reactionary blocker, the minus is mostly irrelevant, and you can drop down and take out some giant creatures relatively easily with him. You can open lane him, but then he starts to get a little bit worse, because then once he gets blocked, he gets the minus, then if he gets blocked by a Grove Matriarch, there's another minus on top. It just kind of snowballs. But it is one of the best defensive reactionary creatures in draft. On the other hand, Zombie Titan is a very strong creature if you can place him in the left and rightmost lanes, the side lanes. 6/6, 10/10, 16/16 is a perfect rule of 6 progression. If you're not familiar with the rule of 6, it is a theory that says that you want to have a certain number of creatures that follow that progression in your deck, the 6, 10, 16 progression, because those are that's the curve, basically. If you are at that level, your creature's stats are average. Anything above that, you are above average, and below it, you're below average, obviously. If you're playing creatures with below average attack, then you can't kill creatures with average or above average health. And things can snowball against you very quickly. If it takes you multiple combats to trade off, that opens up the option of your opponent to make combat tricks. The other cards in this hand, Bulwark Bash is pretty terrible. Yeah, I don't know what to say about this. Unless you have Automaton Prime, which is in this draft environment because it's a heroic from the new set, or some other armor creatures. Again, I don't know exactly what's in this rotation. This is worthless. And even if you do, it's still very dependent upon you having 1, maybe 2 very specific creatures from your deck on the board. This is a terrible spell to draft right now, or generally any time. It can have a place in a armor deck if you don't have Gauntlets of Solgrim. Gauntlets of Solgrim's kind of the same card. It does armor damage. It just doesn't multiply, but it also adds armor. So Gauntlets of Solgrim is a superior pick. It's legendary if you're doing constructed, but it's the superior option. But if you're trying to make an armor deck and don't have it, this is a moderately acceptable alternative. Oh, hey, I've got Bissell Brute. Thank you, Heroes Kage. That was the one I was trying to remember. Welcome, Resolute. Welcome, Heroes Kage. Okay. Okay, so it has. All right. Might Mind Operator. When we were talking about the rule of 6, you go 4, 6, 10. That is below average stats for attack. It's not going to push a lot of damage through. It can take buffs fairly well because it's got a big butt. But then you're starting to invest multiple cards into one creature, and any sort of removal negates it in a negative tempo play. You want to be able to play creatures that can stand on their own without requiring buffing. Buffing can be and is oftentimes a acceptable action, but if a creature requires a buff to be useful, then it's much less likely that it is something that you want to draft. Doesn't mean you don't want to put it into a deck you build around. This guy I would never put into a deck to build around either, but in draft you really want creatures that can stand on their own. And a small aggressive creature is not worth talking about. 2/7/9. It has massively small attack because it's aggressive. So the choice is between Rot Fiend and Zombie Titan, and I think I'm going to take the Rot Fiend. It gives me a 7-drop for later in the game. All right, so we were just talking about how buffs can be useful, and then this pick is going to make me discuss that a little bit more. Because Obsidian Spitter is a 7-drop. It's not a terrible card to draft as a hate card against Alolan Armor, but it is not a card that I particularly want to take in a 4-card pack. If I pick it up later in a 2-card pack, 3-card pack, I'll be happy. But this is not something that I'm going to go out of my way to try and take, particularly when I've got a couple of meaningful buffs up here that can offset it. Verdant Sphere, we'll talk about that real quick, is worthless. Anytime you have a buff spell that only gives plus health in draft is probably not going to be the right pick. You want to be able to have buff spells that will give you surprise extra damage to take a trade that you would be losing and turn it into one that you're winning. In this case, yeah, you can do that with this, but you have to already be trading evenly. If you're not already trading evenly, you can't buff and get better. Well, I guess you could go from a negative trade to an even trade, but you don't get the even trade on your turn, so your opponent then has a chance to respond. Anyways, long story short, you want if you're going to go with buffs, you want buffs that gives both plus attack and plus health. So that leaves us with Savage Oath, a very solid card, and only buffs Utera, which is its major drawback. Its level 1 is not spectacular, but its level 3 is amazing, and is a complete game ender if you play it at the right time. I like taking one of these in a draft because it gives breakthrough, which will allow me to end a stalemate if it comes to that, and it frequently comes to that. So I'll probably take this guy, but first I want to talk about Dryad's Boon. Dryad's Boon on the right creature is remarkable. But it is a slower acting card than Savage Oath. Savage Oath is, haha, surprise, my creature now has breakthrough and I win. Whereas Dryad's Boon is, alright, my creature is going to slowly grow and become an unstoppable nightmare force that you have to deal with. If you can't deal with it, you lose. The trick is, if they can deal with it, they generally get card advantage out of it because you've put your creature and the Dryad's Boon into a card, and they sometimes, not always, can take it out one card for your 2. So I'm going to take the Savage Oath here. If this same pack comes up again, I'll take the Dryad's Boon because I don't necessarily want multiple Savage Oaths. All right, here I need to see this guy that changed it. Okay. So he's gotten better stats, as has the Shardclaw Crusher. I already have a Savage Oath. I don't want the Savage Oath. We'll rule that out. You don't want to get more than about... Well, you definitely don't want more than the 3rd spells. I try to keep myself under 5 spells in general in draft. Constructed's a whole other set of rules to play by, but in draft you really, really want good creatures that stand on their own. Or the things that can generate additional card advantage. Gloom Reaper Witch can, but it is very dependent on your opponent having very weak creatures. With no minus attack and no plans to get much minus attack, Gloom Reaper Witch stats have gotten better. They're 5, 9, 16. They're only 1 under the rule of 6, which is pretty decent. But I think I'm going to go with the Shardclaw Crusher because it is a potential for a blocker and a buff all in one card.
Hey, Dad.
Hi, Talitha.
Mama?
Mama's out at an appointment. She'll be back in a little bit, okay?
Over there.
Yep. You want to go play with Cat and Corey? Okay, go play with Cat and Corey. This is a no-brainer. Zithian Host is one of the worst cards that you can draft. Really, there is nothing good that I have to say about this. A 3-1 at level 1 is borderline worthless. I will admit there is the occasional scenario where you can drop him and get a little bit of reach for lethal, but that scenario is so rare and so far between, it is not worth taking it over pretty much anything else. Unless this is a bad spell. If this is a bad spell, you take a creature, because you always take a creature over a bad spell. Deathseeker, on the other hand, is a double blocker, which is to say he'll drop down, block something once, and then block it again. When you are in a race at the end of the game, it doesn't matter if it's under-leveled or not. That can be a major factor. So I will definitely take the double blocker. Oh, let's see here. Got another Lotus here. I'm not going to take it for the same reasons I discussed earlier. Verdant Sphere is a bad spell. Grave Pact is tempting. I don't have a lot. Well, I'm, 5 picks in. I don't have any free creatures except for the Deathseeker, which is not a bad thing. I could take the Grave Pact and look to sacrifice Deathseeker or some tokens that I get later. It's actually not a bad plan, but I don't think that I want to take the Grave Pact here. It is soft gated. It does give me some removal options, but in general, in draft, you want strong creatures. I haven't tried this guy out. He looks interesting with an 8 attack at level 1. The Symbiote is a very nice card, particularly when you get to the rank 2 and 3. Rank 1, 5/5 is low enough that you can't really count on it. Rank 2, it follows the rule of 6 for rank 2, which is 10 attack. And then rank 3, it's 1 under, but 4 regenerate and 6 regenerate. That means that he can very easily clear underleveled creatures for almost free, when then regenerate back up to max health, and then still have to be dealt with. I think that's the strongest card in the pack, although the Grove Keeper is kind of tempting, because I have the Lightbringer Council. They synergize together. You hit the opponent, gain life, create a token, hit the opponent with the token, gain life, create another token, etc., etc. But the Symbiote's the way to go here. Oh, gosh. So, occasionally you'll get absolutely terrible picks. Festering Slime, I'm not a fan of. It really feels like a kind of weaker Blightwalker. It's that soft minus removal, and its stats are abysmal to the point of being not worth mentioning. Any armored creature just kills it straight out, basically. Whispers of Dendris, a small Ferocious Roar. This might be worth taking. You don't want to play it in player level 1 or 2, but if you put it in and you play it, and really you don't even want to play it in player rank 3. It just doesn't grow fast enough to be useful. And if you look at Ferocious Roar, you go 2/2, 4/4, 6/6 with Breakthrough on the 6/6. This, you'd have to get to player level 6 to get the +6/+6, and by the time you're in player level 6, you're trying to find something to break the game open, and that's more the Savage Oath roll, not the Whispers of Dendris roll. It can be useful, obviously, but it's not a great spell. Vigor Wisp, if you have ways to heal it, it can sustain your board, but it doesn't follow the rule of 6. It's a undervalued creature, and I cannot say that I'm a fan of it. I have nothing thus far that gives health, and I'm not going to take spells that give health. Misery Demon. Hi, Dad. Hi, Talitha. Can you let me scream? Okay, I love you. Mwah. Misery Demon is a better Zithian host, basically. It gives you a little bit of reach. Its stats are subpar and dies to a stiff breeze. But it can give you that last little bit of damage you need. But I'm going to go with the Grimgaunt Spectre. Yes, its rank 1 is terrible at a 3-3. But the rank 2 and the rank 3, given that it has mobility, are actually very solid. The rank 2 being above average really redeems this card. The rank 3 being a 14 with mobility means that you can drop it with open lanes on either side in that board state and have your opponent have to be able to block out a lot. What, Talitha? What? I thought you were going to play with Cat and Corey. You want to sit in my lap?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, gosh.
What are you doing?
I am streaming.
Oh,
Can you say hi to everybody? Wave to the camera.
Hi.
Oh, but yes, the Spectre is definitely what I'm going to take here. Next up. Phew. I think this time I'm going to take the Oxidian Spitter. Chiselhearth Hunter, I am not a fan of. I've never liked this creature. Admittedly, I undervalue it. I know I do. I've discussed this on drafts before that it comes in at best as a 6, 10, 15. So it doesn't quite hit the rule of 6 if you have a full board. If you don't have a full board, it comes in significantly weaker. And yeah, it does have high health, but I've never been a fan of the Hunter. The Darkheart Wanderer is interesting if you've got a lot of buffs going. I don't so far, and the only buff I actually do have can't be applied to Darkheart. It's a spring.
Yeah.
Can't be applied to the Darkheart Wanderer.
Bounce.
Yep, bounce. Cavern Serpent, it gives you a little bit of reach, but its stats are definitely subpar. I'm going to take the 7-drop as I don't ever want to play this in player level 1, but having a 7-drop rank 1 creature is always useful later in the game. I don't know, always, but here, Torgmai Mender is not a bad pick, but you have to go with Howl of Zith. If Howl of Zith is in the draft, I know they nerfed it to 3 times your rank instead of 4 times the rank. It is still the greatest finishing card in the game. You don't have to level it, and then all of a sudden, in rank 3, you get 9 damage to the face. It goes to rank 4, it's 12 damage to the face. No matter the board state, no matter what's going on, if you've gotten your opponent low enough, Howl of Zith will win you the game. I'm going to take the Deep Branch Prowler here for the same reason I took Obsidian Spitter. I don't want to play it in player level 1 unless I've got a massive amount of buff to put on it. But late game, having an 8-drop is always useful. Early game, if I draw the Prowler with the Savage Oath, it is very tempting to make a 10-10 breakthrough, though. Disciple of Virik is a new card that I've not played with before. It gives you some reach. It's slightly under the rule of 6, but not significantly so that I think its formation and reachability more than make up for its lack of attack stat at rank 2 and 3. Is there anything else in here that I'd rather have? Rite of the Grimgaunt is tempting. Go back and see everything I talked about with Dryad's Boon. Applies exactly to Rite of the Grimgaunt. I'm not creating enough creatures that are going to be dying. If I have to spawn a whole lot of tokens, Rite of the Grimgaunt and Dryad's Boon both get more value. Yes, it does trigger off of your opponent's creatures, unlike Dryad's Boon. But I can't find myself wanting to take it, particularly over this Disciple of Virik. The 8-drop is also tempting, just for having an 8-drop. You want lots and lots and lots of underdrops in your deck. I currently have 1, 2, 3 creatures with 7 or more attack. This would give me a 4th. But I think I'm going to go with the Disciple of Viren, just because I haven't played with him before. Shimmer Fang Serpent. Wow. I haven't seen that in ages. Doesn't have a big enough attack to be meaningful in its poison. However, it is functionally a removal card. You can drop it in front of something. As long as it doesn't have armor or regen, it will eventually die to the Shimmer Fang Serpent's poison. So it is not a bad pick, but it definitely does not exceed the Rot Fiend in the top right. Other cards here, the Mantis is a 6-drop, decent enough for that purpose. The gain a rank abilities are all very hit and miss. I don't ever really look at the gain a rank abilities when evaluating a card unless there's something game breaking. Gain a little bit of health is not game breaking. So this really has to stand on its stats, and its stats are subpar. They're not bad, but they're not anything to be excited about. Brood Horror. This is an interesting creature because it buffs things that you're putting into play. I don't really like it because it's a buff / creature that's going to die / you drop it and then you are trying to basically play to the future in your next hand, which may or may not be useful, and its stats on its own aren't great. They're 1 less than Rule of 6, so I'm going to go with the Rot Fiend here. Okay, so this is a pretty strong pack. I quite like this one. We'll start with Bride of Frankenbaum, which I'm not going to pick. It is nice to see more Abomination love. I 5, 8, 13 are subpar stats, but they feel pretty close to Dr. Frankenbaum himself. Although Dr. Frankenbaum's ability is much, much better than Bride of Frankenbaum's, unless you're in some sort of constructed type deck, in which case you're going to be able to make better use of life gain. In draft, life gain is a stall tactic, and that's about it. You cannot count on having cards that will synergize with the life gain. Now, the top 3 cards, every one of them is a good, useful card. And it's going to be tough to pick which one to take. So Blightwalker is hard gate removal. That's about all I can really say to that. It's rank 3, can end games if you buff it, because they can only block it once, and then it dies, and then they have to block it again, regardless of what they block it with. And it's got enough health to be able to survive. However, it pales in comparison to Grove Matriarch. Grove Matriarch is arguably one of the stronger commons. It's a double blocker, so much like the Death Seeker, but its stats are better divided between the two and solid enough to be a great play at almost every level. The rank 1 is a little bit weak. With the 4/6 and the 1/1 combined, you're looking at a 5 attack creature functionally, unless you're hitting armor or regen, which is a consideration. But the 8 and 14 with a 3/3 and a 5/5 gets that to 11 and 19 functional damage or functional attack, which puts it well above the curve. The other card is Kitaru Sprites, and if you follow follow Solforge on Facebook, you know Kit is talking about returning to the game. This card is obviously named after Kit. That having been said, it is also a remarkably useful card in draft. The ability to block and then overwrite her to basically heal her to full is very useful. Her stats aren't spectacular, but she, if you don't have direct removal, can be very difficult to kill. So I'm actually going to take the Kitaru Sprite. There's a Restless Wanderers that we talked about earlier. It's a Spirit Wanderer, so if I'd taken that Restless Wanderer on the very first pick, this would be an obvious no-brainer, but I'd be in a terrible position because I'm almost halfway through my draft. That would be my second one. So Having no Spirit Wanderers, that's a bad pick. I still don't like Festering Slime, so I'm going to take the 6-drop Mantis. I've already got one Howl of Zith. I don't want a second, so I will take a creature over a spell. It's not a great creature, but it's better than a spell. It lets me block if I need to. Okay, so this would have been a double draft for me if I had taken the Nexus Bubble. This time I'm not going to pass on the Legendary, because this Legendary is actually much more useful in draft than the first one I had. And there's nothing else in this pack that is particularly spectacular. Progeny of Zith is kind of worthless in draft. You've really got to have a deck built and designed to take advantage of its respawn capabilities. Just spawning itself 3 times doesn't really work out so great because its stats are so terrible. And it's the only card in the game that functionally gets worse as you level it. Scavenger Scorpion, not a great stat progression, not a high enough attack level 1 to be an underdrop or a great underdrop. You can use it in that role, but not a great one. Obsidian Spitter is a 7-drop. Armor is a rare enough ability in draft that, yes, it does come up, but not going to be something that you're drafting this for. You don't want to draft a lot of hate. You draft this as a 7-drop that just happens to have hate attached to it. Bear Rider is a very interesting card. It's one of the best level 2 underdrops in the game. 16 attack will kill most rank 3 creatures. So if you get level 1 leveled up and then don't play this in level 2, level something in its place, once you get to level 3, the level 2 is still very useful. So it's that mid-range underdrop, which it does very, very well. That having been said, I take Scythe of Chiron. There's no question here. Minus attack to the board, plus attack on 1 creature for every creature your opponent has. At -2, -4, -6, that's kind of a no-brainer.